must return to her father, is to go back to a desolate place. Because there's very little, her only hope at this point of taking a husband is Shelah. Because she's tainted goods. Men want, everybody wants, they wanted a virgin of Israel. They didn't want this woman who's now a black widow because she's done killed two husbands, Something wrong with her, she can't cook or something because they're dying like, you're dropping over like flies. No, she's like, I'm stuck. I am in a desolate place. I will have no family if I don't get Shelah. Okay? At this time, Tamar had to cover or conceal herself and wait for the promises of Judah's third son, Shelah. Okay? They put on their widow's garb, and they wear that all the time. The fact that she was in her father's house is a shadow picture of how Yahweh has never taken his eyes nor his caring hand off the dispersed Sephardic Jews. He's always provided a way for the remnant to be protected, provided, and delivered. We count on that, don't we? Okay. Let's go back to the text. Genesis 38, 12 through 14. Now, after a considerable time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. Oh, wait a minute. Why is this here? Yes, never mind. I'm sorry. Now, after a considerable time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, I thought I was confused, but I was just confused. It happens. Just talk to my wife. Now, after a considerable time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died, and when the time of mourning was ended, Judah went up to his sheep shearers at Timnah, he and his friend Hiram the Adullamite. And it was told to Tamar, "Behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep." So she removed her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil and wrapped herself and sat in the gateway of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah had grown up and she had not been given to him as a wife. Judah had neglected to fulfill his promise. He had rejected Tamar out of the family. Judah's wife, the mother of Er, Onan, and Shelah, dies, and back at Tamar's father's house, Tamar gets word that her inheritance is in jeopardy. Okay? Genesis 38, he went up to shear his sheep. Father-in-law is from the root chomah, meaning protective wall. Timnah, a portion assigned. Shear is gazaz, a prime root to cut off. In other words, her security, her wall of protection, was going up to get his portion and to cut her off or out of the inheritance, the flock. Was he going to get another wife? The evidence points that he was. He was looking for something. He wanted something. The account continues in verse 14. And she put her widow's garments off of her and covered her with a veil and wrapped herself and sat in an open place, which is by the way to Timnah. And for she saw that Shelah was grown and she had not been given to him as a wife. Shelah was grown and Judah had not kept his promise. Many Sephardics discovered that Shiloh had indeed come, but Judah had not kept their promise with Shiloh. Tamar removes her desolation. She conceals her identity by covering her face with a veil, then sits in plain sight by the double fountain of Timnah, or to claim her double portion. Remember, the right of the firstborn, double portion, which belongs to the fruit of her womb. Let's continue with the narrative. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, for she had covered her face. So he turned aside to her by the road and said, "Here now, let me come into you." This is why I think he might have been looking for a wife. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law, and she said, "What will you?" And she said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" And he said, "Therefore, I will send you a young goat from the flock." And she said, "Moreover, what will you give a pledge until you send it?" He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She said, "Your seal, your cord, and the staff that's in your hand." It's a pretty big pledge. So he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. This verse is very interesting because it says that when Judah sees her, he thinks her to be a harlot because she has covered her face. This was the fate of the Sephardic people. Their brethren Judah saw them as having prostituted themselves with false gods. When they saw the crucifixes around their neck, they could not see that it was only to preserve life of a chosen tribe, that the Sephardim had hidden their identities, continuing to live and to be faithful to the Torah in secret. Sometime today, get with my wife. She's wearing a Sephardic Star of David, and ask her about it. I'm not going to tell you what's so special about it, but it's really cool. Okay, but check out this. It's a Sephardic. It's a replica of what they were wearing in the time. A lot of them were wearing in the time in Spain. Judah asked to have relations with Tamar, and Tamar, having learned her lesson, you can't always believe everything everybody tells you, asked Judah for a pledge of his promised payment for her services. When Judah asked her what she should have him to give her as a pledge, Tamar doesn't even have to think twice. She asks for everything. His signet ring, hotam, his bracelets, patal, which is incidentally the same word used in Numbers 15:38 in reference to the blue cord that is to be included in the tzitzit. The blue cord obviously represents Messiah. And his staff, mate, which literally means rod, staff, or tribe. She wanted all of it. She wanted her inheritance. She wanted all of the inheritance. She didn't want just part. She wanted the whole 9 yards. The authority, the blessing, the scepter, everything. The claim to the tribe and the kingdom. Amazingly, Judah, who, according to Dean, is swimming in the carnal channel of the stream at the river at the time, just gives it to her. Okay, whatever. Okay. Continuing with the narrative. Then she arose and departed and removed her veil and put on her widow's garments. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend, the Adullamite, to receive the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. He asked the men of the place, saying, "Where is the temple prostitute who was by the road of Enaim?" And they said, "There has been no temple prostitute here." So he returned to Judah and said, "I did not find her. And furthermore, the men of the place said, there hasn't been a temple prostitute there." Judah said, let her keep him, otherwise we would become a laughingstock. After all, I sent this young goat, but you did not find her. He had just given away his whole identity, and he said, let her keep him. It didn't seem to faze him. Sometimes I don't understand this guy. The Sephardim journeyed in 1492 with Cristobal Colon to the Americas. Not just Costa Rica, but all of the Americas. They returned back to the desolate places wearing their garments of exile, but they had conceived truth. They had been introduced to the Messiah. Through the journey, many of the Sephardim has found the Messiah. They held truth in their hearts. They continued to their lives, conversos on the outside, but secretly keeping Torah and faithfully waiting for the return of Shiloh, their Messiah. Remember, when Judah sent his servants back to look for her, he was told there was never a harlot here. The Sephardics never departed when they made the conversion to Catholicism. They never departed from Torah. It was all done in secret, just to preserve their lives. Now it was about 3 months later that Judah was informed, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has played the harlot, and behold, she is also with child by harlotry." And Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." Kind of harsh. Kind of harsh. It was while she was being brought out that she sent to her father-in-law, saying, "Hold on a second. I'm with child by the man to whom these things belong." And he said, "Check this out and see who they belong to." Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, inasmuch as I did not give her my son Shelah, and he did not have relations with her again." The man knew what his problem was. He knew what he had failed to do immediately. Tamar very wisely asked Judah to scrutinize the 3 items and decide for himself who the owner is. Judah acknowledges that Tamar had been more righteous than he. After all, he had broken his vow, prohibited his son from completing the Torah, and seemingly taken up with a roadside prostitute, all the while handing over his authority, blessing, and the ruling scepter of the tribe of Judah. Finishing up, "And it came about at the time she was giving birth that, behold, there were twins in her womb. Moreover, it took place that while she was giving birth, one put out his hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, and saying, 'This one came out first.' But it came out, and he drew back his hand, and behold, his brother came out. Then she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." So he was